Hi, my name's Kenny C, and last July I travelled to the Philippines with two friends for a 2-week trip. In short, it was incredible, and I would highly recommend this place to anyone thinking of going in the future. I'll explain why shortly and take you through what we did, but another reason I wanted to make this video was to help answer the two following questions. 1. What is it like travelling the Philippines in wet season? And 2. Is 14 days enough time to properly experience the Philippines? Now before my trip I did a lot of research on where to go, what to do and how to do it. However, almost all of the videos were in peak season and part of a trip spanning a month or longer, and I felt they could only help me so much. I was trying to also gauge what weather to expect, and again I struggled to find videos taken in the rainy season. So, if like me, you're travelling during the wet season and going for a couple of weeks away from work, then stay tuned. Or, if you just want some more validation on whether to travel to the Philippines, then you're also in luck. So after a short stay in Manila, we flew to Puerto Princesa. Here we stayed at Daluan Beach and Mountain Resort, which was a couple of hours drive from the airport. This was by far the nicest place we stayed in during our trip, as we properly wanted to wind down and relax after the long flight to get to the Philippines the day before. We also found this place to be extremely good value for what you were getting, costing us £44 each per night. The rooms were big, the food was great, the beach was huge, and the swim at bar was a lot of fun. The main benefit of Daluan Resort, however, is its location. The most popular activity in Puerto Princesa is the Underground River Tour, one of the new 7 wonders of nature. If you're staying in Puerto Princesa town, then it'll take you about an hour to get to, plus the boat ride around the coast. But if you're staying at Daluan, then it's just a short walk along the beach to the port area, where you'll then be boated over. The river is definitely worth doing, however I personally thought it was slightly overhyped, and as a result I wasn't quite as blown away by it as I would have been had I been going in blind. Now in a more literal sense, it will feel like you're blind going into the caves. They are completely pitch black, which is why this footage is hardly showing anything. Your tour guide will have a spotlight which they'll use to point out some amazing natural formations found within, and help give you a real sense of the size and scale of the innermost cavern, which is enormous. Warning though, if you're not a fan of bats, then this tour probably isn't for you. Just take a listen to this. Now, my favourite bit of that day was actually the trip back. You'll have a chance to do an 800-metre zip line that sees you flying across the sea, giving you an incredible view of Sabang beach. Annoyingly though, it was so hot that day that my GoPro steamed up, so on a side note, if you do have a GoPro, I'd highly recommend getting some anti-fog inserts, as they'll come in handy in situations like this and also for any snorkeling you do. Other activities here included kayaking out to Sabang Waterfall, which turned out to be one of my favourite activities of the trip. The waterfall is incredible, and at the bottom sits a man-made pool that the falls feed into. This is the first example of why going in low season has its benefits. Not a single person disturbed us for the 2 hours we spent here. It's also worth noting the weather at this point. You'll have periods that are overcast throughout your trip, but even this time of the year the sun can still be incredibly strong. I forgot to put sunscreen on my feet before we went kayaking, and despite being overcast for most of the day, this was the result. Next up on the trip was Port Barton, which was about a 4-hour van run away, costing us about £8. Port Barton is more off the beaten track. It's not somewhere a lot of other videos cover or somewhere that's promoted a lot online, which makes it a bit more of a hidden gem. During our first day here, we went on one of the local tours. There'll be variations of these tours wherever you go, and in this case I think we did tour B. The snorkeling in Port Barton was some of the very best we found, and there's a particular area our tour took us that is renowned for turtle spotting, which, as you can see, did not disappoint. We did a lot of snorkeling over the 2 weeks, and this was the only turtle we saw, and some people we met didn't see a single one during their stay in the Philippines. So if seeing one is a must, then you may want to check out Port Barton. Around midday, all of the tours would go and meet up on this tiny island that was something out of paradise. The setting alone made this one of the best moments of our trip. you get cooked lunch, enough time to explore the island, and then back on the boat to finish the tour. The next day we walked to Papawayan Falls. During low season it can be harder to find guides to take you to some of these places, so we figured we'd try and find it on our own. And after correctly guessing the direction at multiple crossroads, we managed to find it. On our 6th day we travelled further up mainland Palawan to El Nido. This was another 4-hour van journey costing us another £8. El Nido is a lot bigger and busier than Port Barton. We stayed in a hostel called Amakan, which completely exceeded our expectations when we arrived. As far as hostels go, especially in the Philippines, this place is definitely in the top bracket and was the equivalent of £12 per night. We saw an ad on the front desk for a day trip called Tour Z. This turned out to be my favourite day of the entire trip. You're taken down to the harbour area where you meet the rest of your group and then boated out to the largest tour boat in El Nido to set off for the day. Part of what makes this tour so incredible is El Nido's dramatic landscape. You'll stop off at various locations along the way for snorkling and boat jumping, but the highlight was the sandbar where we played beach volleyball. Finally, provided you're lucky with the sunset, you'll be shipped to the perfect viewing location before being brought back into the harbour. We had a great group of people for this day trip, and were all so drunk by the end of it that a lot of us decided to carry on with food and drinks in town. And yes, this is what makes it different to the usual tours you'll see advertised. It is essentially a booze cruise, and the boat will be playing loud music throughout the day. If you're also not that keen on getting to know a large group of people you'll likely never see again, then Tour Z probably isn't for you. And that's completely understandable if you're wanting a more traditional, quieter experience. Now this trip came to as little as £15. It was probably the best valued thing we did out there, as it covers a boat ride around stunning El Nido, unlimited drinks for the day, lunch on board and a free massage. The rest of our time in El Nido was spent waterfall chasing again and travelling up to Nakpan Beach. As with the caves earlier, I think I'd hyped Nakpan Beach up a lot in my head from hearing other channels say it was one of the best things they'd done in the whole of the Philippines. So we didn't have the best weather when we went, but I didn't actually film anything because I didn't find there was much to get excited about. It also takes you about an hour to get to from El Nido, so if you've hired your own bikes then this may be a bit more fun, but we squished into 2 tuk-tuks, which wasn't the most comfortable. The next part of our trip is something we planned way in advance, and takes up 5 days and 4 nights. It's called the Tao Experience and is an island hopping trip that sees you sleeping in a number of extremely isolated places and completely closing yourself off from the outside world. Online it says groups can be up to 24 people large, but ours was much smaller at just 10 people, with about 8 crew members. Tao is an amazing experience. One of my favourite things about it was the complete detox from technology. You literally are unable to use your phone, and knowing you're unreachable to the outside world is extremely refreshing. During the days you'll snorkel in shipwrecks, go cliff jumping, explore islands and have downtime to do whatever suits. Jimboy, our group leader and the ship's captain, know these islands like the back of their palm, so you're guaranteed to see some amazing sights. The snorkeling during Tao was the best of our trip, and the Blue Lagoon we travelled to just off El Nido was a particular standout. As the days come to a close, you'll stop off at base camp on one of the many islands between El Nido and Coron. Here you'll have dinner, drink with fellow campmates, and sleep in small wooden huts that have nothing but a mattress and a mosquito net. Super simple and super satisfying. The evenings were great fun. There tended to be a game of volleyball going on while dinner was cooked, and usually ended up with everyone drinking a fair amount of beer and a cocktail called Jungle Juice while playing card games. You'll then wake up to another freshly cooked meal and set sail for another day out at sea. The food deserves more of a shout out. It is incredible. You'll have lots of rice, fish and fruit, all of which is fresh and gathered that day. I can't remember the last time I maintained such a good diet for 5 days straight, and ended up coming back home in better shape than I was when I'd left. Tao is no doubt an incredible experience, however I would say that the experience is very much dependent on the group that you're travelling with. This is really down to potluck and not something Tao can hold much accountability for. Our group of 10 was made up of mostly couples, and while we had fun with most of the group, the general vibe of the trip meant that a lot of couples kept to themselves, which I think had a knock-on effect on how the crew members interacted with us. At the end of the trip we were left thinking how much better the trip could have been if we had had the group from our Tour Z day. On the final day of Tao we pulled into the port in Coron town, which would be the final leg of our trip. The main town of Coron is nothing special, so we purposely stayed on a small island a short boat journey away called Discovery Island. This accommodation was fairly average, but it definitely boasts the benefit of enabling you to experience Coron whilst also being able to remove yourself from the bustling centre. This was the only time on our trip where we definitely felt the effects of coming in wet season. One of the days the heavens really opened, but most of the time it was just grey and cloudy. This didn't stop the beauty of Coron showing, however, as it boasts as equally dramatic landscape as El Nido does. We spent half a day exploring this on another tour, and while there are a fair amount of tourists, our tour guide did point out that this wasn't even close to the amount we'd be sharing the lagoons with had we come in the high season. Some other things to consider are walking to the top of Coron Hill, where there's a Hollywood-esque sign that overlooks the town below, and going to the hot springs nearby. Lastly, a special shout out to Coffee Kong for having the best Wi-Fi in the Philippines and smoothies to match it. From there, we packed up, returned to Manila and jetted home. So that was our Philippines trip. As I'm sure you can tell, it is truly an incredible place and I would love to go back someday. Now, going back to the questions I wanted to answer at the beginning of the video. 1. What is it like travelling the Philippines in wet season? If you're as worried about the weather as I was, then don't worry. Sure, you'll get some rain and be caught in some storms, but the sun will still shine. You're not likely to have clear blue skies when it does, as there always tended to be a couple of clouds, but you'll still have highs of 31 and lows of 24. Hopefully you've gotten an idea of the weather you can expect just from the footage throughout this video. You'll also benefit from fewer tourists, and I personally managed to get some cheap flights, flying from London to Manila with Etihad Airways for only £400 return, although you may be able to get similar priced flights in peak season, so that's worth checking. Secondly, is 14 days enough time to properly experience the Philippines? Personally, I thought it was. Even though we stuck to Palawan, we got to experience much of what you can find on any of the other islands, and then thanks to Tao, we got more up close and personal with Filipino culture in a short amount of time. While we didn't swim with whale sharks or see the chocolate hills, there was only so much you can do in 2 weeks. I would have happily stayed out for longer, but as I said at the beginning, this was not part of a gap year or a 3-month trip abroad. This was a 17-day break away from the working life, and there's only so much you can fit in if you're also wanting to return home refreshed. A couple of other questions I've been asked since I returned. Is the Philippines safe? As with anywhere, some places are and some aren't, but neither me or my friends ran into any trouble in our time there. Secondly, is it cheap? If you haven't figured that out by now from this video, then the answer is a resounding yes. Extremely. A beer can be the equivalent of 60p, and if you want to splash some cash on some nicer accommodation rather than staying in hostels, then it won't set you back much. If you have any other questions, then please leave them in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. I've also included links in the description to the places that we stayed if you're interested, and also a link to my shorter, more fine-tuned Philippines video in the bottom right hand corner of this video. Finally, a huge thank you for watching. I really hope this video was insightful and helps you plan your getaway to the Philippines, and I would love to know how it went when you get back.